Can you hear me? Good. I've been struggling all day, not being able to hear people who don't want to speak into the microphone. If that shoe fits, wear it. So, science is making the case for God. Trust me, that's not universally true. Roughly 40% of all physicists are still atheists. So they resist completely the notion that science has proved the existence of God. In fact, there's a branch of scientific philosophy that believes in upward creation. And that means that everything that happens as a result of the interaction between matter and energy, and absolutely nothing else. That means that the creation of the universe was a random event, just happened. Atoms just began to be formed. Stars began to happen. It's all random. And that consciousness is a result of the brain. Consciousness comes from the maturing of the brain. Well, that's a theory anyway. It's actually never been proven, and it's mostly a belief. So some have accused the scientific materialists, as they're called, of being subscribers to the religion of science. They act more like televangelists than scientists. They pound the table and say, that can't be true, and don't bother me with the facts, I've already made up my mind. And then there's the scientific idealists who believe just exactly the opposite, that creation is downward. And that means that somebody had their fingers on the scale. The universe itself, the physical part of the universe, happened at the Big Bang, which was some 14 billion years ago. Now that's a very long time. You know, that's longer than I've been alive, for sure. And I'm old. 14 billion years ago, the Big Bang occurred. And physicists and cosmologists now know that within 1/1,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang, the four fundamental forces of the universe, which are gravity, the electromagnetic force, and the strong and weak nuclear force, all were determined in that 1/1,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang, which was, admittedly, everybody believes it was a hell of a big explosion. And out of that came the ratios of these four fundamental forces. And if they had been off by even a fraction, the universe never would have happened. There never would have been a star formed. In fact, the relationship between the electromagnetic force and the strong nuclear force is so perfectly arranged that if it were off by even the tiniest fraction of the tiniest fraction, like 1 part in 100 quadrillion, that's a very large number. That's 1 with 17 zeros after it. That's a very small part to be off, and it wasn't off, it was on. So how in the world did this random explosion create the Goldilocks arrangement of the physical forces, the basic fundamental forces of the universe? Well, the scientific materialists just say, well, it just happened, you know. They do not want to acknowledge the existence, excuse me, of downward creation or a creator, if you will. And some of the former atheists have been convinced by this analysis that they needed to change their mind. Fred Hoyle, who was the physicist who coined the term Big Bang, said this. He said that his atheism was greatly shaken at these developments. He later wrote that a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with the physics as well as chemistry and biology. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me to be so overwhelming as to put this conclusion beyond question. A guy used to be an atheist, now sees that somebody was messing with the scale. Somebody had their finger on the scale. And of course, the logical assumption is that God, the infinite intelligence, as some of the quotes that Judy read, a mathematician of the highest order, created the rules and the arrangement and the forces that had the universe come into physical existence. So much for that part of the story. Next, we have to deal with Einstein's relativity, which set the parameters of how the universe is shaped, discovered a speed limit for the speed of light, that nothing can go faster than the speed of light, and created, and now there's bookloads of formulas that determine what goes on in the universe based on Einstein's work. You all know the equation E equals mc squared. Well, that gave birth to this whole volume of formulas and mathematics that describe the planetary movements and the stuff that goes on in the physical universe. And then around the turn of the 20th century, Max Planck came up with this thing called quantum mechanics. And that was the physics that related to very small things, subatomic particles and so forth. And there's some really weird stuff in quantum mechanics. If you aren't weirded out by quantum mechanics, you are not paying attention. There's the wave-particle duality. In quantum mechanics, it's been discovered that energy can take the form of a wave or a particle, and it's indeterminate until what happens? Till somebody observes it and measures it. And when that happens, the waveform collapses into a particle. Now that's pretty strange. What consciousness? You know, here's a question that you might ask yourself. If the Big Bang just happened 14 billion years ago, and if this explosion created this arrangement of the fundamental forces of the universe, how did the particles change into, I mean, how do the waveforms of that energy become particles, become gaseous clouds, become the things that formed stars? Well, there must have been a conscious observer somewhere. And consciousness is another name for God. Quantum consciousness is my preference for a description of that structure that created this thing we call the universe. Well, another weirdness is the uncertainty principle, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And that says that you can only determine whether a particle is in a certain location or how fast it's moving. You can't know both of those aspects of a particle. Really? I know some police agencies that have radar guns and they can pinpoint where you are and how fast you're going. I just had it happen to me. $125 later. Yeah, quantum checkbook. And the last really weird part of it is this intelligent observer paradox, that there must be an observer before particles exist. Up to that point, they're just potential. They're waveforms of probability. If that isn't weird, I don't know what is. But the thing is that between relativity and quantum mechanics are two irreconcilable mathematical bases. One yields a quantity of energy in the universe, relativity, that's much, much smaller than the yield revealed by quantum mechanics. And there's just been this conundrum of how to get around this, because the mathematics don't work together. They're separate systems and they don't agree with one another. So about mid-century, mid-20th century, the notion of string theory began to be discovered and talked about. And it was a mathematical answer to this collision between relativity and quantum mechanics. And the latest version of string theory, the most popular, is called M theory. And in M theory, there are things called membranes, and they've shortened that to branes, spelled B-R-A-N-E, and so it's very difficult to speak about brains because you think of what's inside your skull instead of a membrane. So the M theory suggests that there is these membranes that are two-dimensional, infinitely expanding energy fields, that there's this monstrous amount of energy contained in these membranes, if you will. And they are just exactly like holograms. They are holographic representations of what goes on in the universe. And lo and behold, they are exactly, not only is there a hologram description of the universe itself, but each of us has a subtle body, a subtle energetic body that is two-dimensional and that extends outward without limit. Mystics and saints have for thousands of years been talking about the notion that our consciousness is unlimited. It extends outward without limit. And string theory is suggesting that that's exactly the right notion. Now, there's some things about our physical universe here, the world that we live in, that point to this possibility as something that speaks the truth. One of the things that points in that direction is the physical attributes of people with multiple personality disorder. You all read about people with multiple personalities, but I bet you didn't know that each personality has a different physical structure. You've all heard of voice prints. You know, it's an analysis of the voice quality and timbre and I'm blanking the words I'm trying to find, but personalities have different voice prints, the same vocal cords, but a different print. How is that possible? You haven't heard the best part yet. In some cases, a personality has diabetes, and another personality comes into the same body and does not have diabetes. Diabetes takes years to develop. It takes medicine to control. But a personality that doesn't have diabetes doesn't need to take insulin. And the eyes are the same thing. Some personalities have astigmatism, others don't. Some have glaucoma, others don't. There's even one case where one personality has green eyes and the other personality has brown eyes. How is this possible that the instantaneous change can happen? There's a personality that's known to be, that believes himself to be a drug addict. And when that personality is in that particular body, he has needle tracks on his arms. And another personality comes into the body and the needle tracks disappear. What? How is that possible? Well, what's possible is that this belief system creates the imprint, the hologram. The hologram is based on things that you absolutely believe to be true. And so a personality has a different hologram, and it comes across as changing. If you change holograms, instantaneous, the three-dimensional outcome of a hologram changes like that. And these physical changes in multiple personality disorders take place within seconds or minutes at the most. And so what's going on is the proof that a hologram is what controls the physical result. That's pretty weird. And what this also suggests is a scientific basis for some of the near-death experiences that have happened. What is existing is this hologram, this energy field that is unique to each individual, goes with them wherever they are. And it's two-dimensional, and it interpenetrates the physical body, and it goes wherever. And what happened, let's take an example of Ibn Alexander, who is a neurosurgeon. He came down with a case of E. coli. I'm just losing all my words this morning. I'm sorry. Meningitis. I couldn't come up with meningitis. I'm sorry. E. coli meningitis. And it's 40% of the cases that come down with E. coli meningitis are fatal. He was in a coma for 7 days, and he had a near-death experience. He went out into the energy field, one of these brains, if you will, and had an experience of catching up with his adopted relatives. And he learned that he wasn't abandoned at all. And that changed his mind. It changed a fundamental belief that was important to him. And he came out of a 7-day coma and completely recovered from E. coli meningitis. Highly unusual. In fact, the doctors were having a conversation just before he came out of the coma with the wife and children, saying, it's about time that we unplug him and let him go. And they were very surprised when he woke up. Hello, nice to see you. And then there's the case of Anita Morjani, who checked into a hospital with stage 4B lymphoma in the early stages of organ shutdown. And the oncologist who saw her on admission said, she's not going to make it through the night. We're just going to try and make her comfortable. And the family pleaded and said, no, we're not ready to let go. Please do what you can. And during the night, her lungs were filling up, so they had to aspirate her lungs and clean out some of the stuff. And she had a near-death experience. And she had a conversation with her deceased father that changed her mind. She was a woman of Indian descent, Indian culture, and she was living in Hong Kong in a Chinese culture, attending a British school. So she had no idea who she was supposed to be. And she was always at odds trying to figure out who am I supposed to be and what am I going to do and how is this going to work? So she had a change of mind in the middle of the night and woke up the next morning, and the doctor walked in and she said to the doctor, oh, hello, Dr. Chang. You're the one who aspirated my lungs during the night, right? And of course, the doctor said, how do you know that? We haven't met. And exactly that. And weeks later, she was out of the hospital, completely cancer-free. And doctors from around the world have flown to Hong Kong to look at these medical records because they cannot believe that somebody with lymphoma and organ shutdown has recovered and completely cancer-free. And the reason that that happened is that this energy field, this hologram that was unique to Anita, changed. And the instant it changed the outcome. So, what does all this mean to us? What can we take from this? Well, I think that we can decide that near-death experiences are real, that they happen as a result of this arrangement that's confirmed by the string theory that we have an individual holographic scheme, and we get to create our physical body based on that hologram. And if you change a basic belief, like your self-worth, things will change almost instantaneously. And what does that mean to us? It means that we are children of the Creator, that we are literally having the opportunity to create the life that we choose for ourselves. We have the opportunity to adopt the meanings and the goals and the attributes of the Creator. Infinite unconditional love is what the mystics and the saints have been saying for thousands of years. And we have the opportunity to do that for ourselves. And the reason that we do is because science has discovered the reason that it's set up that way. So my invitation to you is to be in touch with who you really are, to let the energy of the universe, the infinite unconditional love that created you, that created the world in which you can exist, that infinite unconditional love can operate in every aspect of your life if you choose it. So, as it's always the case, it's up to you. You are the captain of your ship. You steer where your soul goes, and that's the way I see it. And I reserve the right to change my mind because I might read something else next week. So it is.